Hi, this is Bill Ringle, host of My Quest for the Best, where we meet business, thought, and community leaders to discuss issues relevant to entrepreneurial growth. Joining us today is Carol Roth. Carol is a business strategist, content producer, deal maker, former investment banker, and author of the New York Times best-selling book, The Entrepreneur Equation. She has worked with hundreds of companies, ranging from a single entrepreneur with an idea to a Fortune 500 business, all on aspects of business and financial strategy. Collectively, she has helped her clients raise more than $1 billion in capital, complete $750 million in mergers and acquisitions, secure high-profile licensing and partnership deals, and create a seven-figure brand loyalty program. She refers to advisory style as spinach in your teeth philosophy, warning business owners never to trust anyone who won't tell them that they have spinach stuck in their teeth. Carol is a frequent radio, TV, and print media contributor on the topics of business and entrepreneurship, appearing regularly on Fox News, MSNBC, among others. Her unsolicited business advice blog at carolroth.com was recently named one of the top 10 small business blogs online, and she herself was named a 2011 Top 100 Small Business Influencer. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. And a 2012 Top 100 Small Business Influencer as of a couple weeks ago, too. So we're on a roll here, Bill.
Congratulations. It's so nice to see that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
So, Carol, tell me, how did you get started in business?
Well, actually, I started my first business when I was 8 years old. It was under the guise of a game that I like to call Store, and the way that it worked is I would go into my sister's room, who was several years younger than me. I would take her stuffed animals and I would bring them back into my room, and I would arrange them in sort of a store retail fashion, and then I would invite her to come in and spend her allowance money to buy them back from me. So I had the entrepreneurial bug at a very early age, although my mom did happen to shut that business down before I could spread it throughout the neighborhood. But I was always one of those kids who had my hands in not only selling things back to my sister, but selling things around the neighborhood and so on and so forth. So it was a very natural progression for me to want to go to school as an undergrad to study business, and I managed to get into the #1 program in the country at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania as an undergrad, and it just kind of spiraled from there. But it was definitely something I had a proclivity towards from a very young age.
A lot of times people will take that experience they had as a youngster and not recognize the impact that it has on our adult lives. But it's very clear that looking for opportunities, thinking about scaling it, looking at what are the obstacles to it, seems to influence and still have reverberations even in your adult life, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And, I don't know that it was even consciously aware to me, that I was consciously aware that there was this sort of connection between what I was interested in and as a youngster and where I ended up. But looking back, that connection is very apparent, and it's something that I definitely encourage others to take a look at and think about the kinds of things that they were interested in when they were younger, because I can tell you that my sister, on the other hand, had absolutely no interest in business. Her only interest was playing with me because I was much cooler since I was several years older, so she would participate in the business game, but she was much more into the arts, and now she's the lead singer of a rock band. So these things do have a tendency to cycle back as you get older.
Fascinating. What is the problem that you solve for business leaders today?
Well, I'm one of those people that I don't instill sort of my thoughts onto other people. I don't say that this is the issue, this is the problem. I tend to work backwards. So I look at other people and I ask them what their problem is, or I spend time with them to try and uncover their problem and solve it for them. I think a lot of people, whether they're in thought leadership or consulting, they tend to have a methodology. They tend to have a 7 steps to success. And I tend to favor frameworks because I believe that everybody has their own definition of success, not to mention their own circumstances, goals, and objectives. So I really do try and take a specialized approach. If I could boil it down to one sort of talking point, though, I think where I really succeed is that I help to take the emotion out of the equation and get people to focus rationally on the task at hand. If I can share a story, a sort of a creation story of mine, when I was in college, I had been interviewing fiercely my senior year for jobs and finally decided on an investment banking job a couple weeks before spring break. And my boyfriend at the time had said, this is great. We're going to go down, a bunch of us, to Florida, to kick back for spring break. Do you want to come with us? And it took me about 2 seconds to say, absolutely not. I'm exhausted from all this interviewing, and all I want to do is go back to my dad's house in the Chicagoland area and relax. Well, a couple weeks later, spring break comes, and we get a phone call. And that phone call is a very strange man asking for my father. And, since I'm a safety girl, I say that my father's not available and please call back. And he calls back a couple times. Well, finally, about the fourth time, it wasn't this guy, it was my boyfriend's father who was on the phone to tell me that my boyfriend had been killed in a car accident. And, I'm sitting there as a 22-year-old, just about to graduate, as somebody who could have been in that car thinking, oh, my God, my world has just collapsed. And, that was one of a series of things that I had to encounter in a very short period of time, including my mom passing away a couple of years later and then my stepmother. And through all of these times when I felt that, I was just not going to make it, I was not going to be able to go on another day, I kept persisting. I kept keeping my eye on the goal and what was going to make me strong and make me give back to the world. So I think I really draw on that strength of taking the emotion out for both myself and for other people, and obviously based on where I've been, and help them really focus on what it is they want to accomplish and think rationally when it's so often very difficult to do that, especially around business.
Because you've had those experiences and because you've had success with helping people take the emotion out of it, I can see that in your book, The Entrepreneur Equation, how you give structures to people to help them make explicit decisions. Was that something that was part of your impetus and motivation for writing the book, was to help more people make better decisions?
Absolutely. I wanted to give people a very realistic decision-making framework, again, very particular to their own situation. I didn't want to say, this is the way to do it, because, again, we all have these different objectives and we have different circumstances going on in our lives. So my definition of success and what I'm able to bring to the table in terms of resources and experience is very different than what other people bring to the table and what they're looking to accomplish. So I wanted to really be able to give people that framework to ask the probing questions for themselves, to put on and layer on their own experiences and focus on what they're looking for to make those appropriate decisions for themselves, instead of saying, if you follow these 7 steps, you will be successful, because that just plain doesn't work, given that we all have these different places that we're trying to get. So that was very much what drove me to write the book. And it's interesting, even though I wrote it for people who were considering going into business, I've gotten a ton of feedback from people who were already in business that it really helped them to reevaluate their business models, and in some cases for people to even evaluate seeking jobs. So it's just having that structure, that non-emotional, non-biased, what am I trying to do and what's the best way to get there focus, that I think has been very valuable for people.
Carol, what is your definition of success for yourself?
Oh, God, my definition of success is getting through a day without collapsing. No, just kidding. I think that I have a very complicated definition of success, that it revolves around accomplishing certain goals that I've set out, that involves, being a good wife and friend and relative and person, and I sort of have a whole list of criteria that I try to live my life by. So I think that for me, it's fulfilling all of those, and it's also always moving that bar out. I don't think success is a place that I get to. I think it's a journey, because anytime I do accomplish something, then we're coming up with 3 additional things to add to the list. So it's sort of a pursuit and a journey more than an end game, but it's always, I guess, wrapped up in doing the best that I can, having a commitment to excellence, but also, being a good person as well.
In business, what are the particular goals that you're striving for now in order to achieve the next level of success in your own business?
I always have a plan, and it's always a very large plan. The way that I approach things is I start with that end, really big goal. Sometimes people call it the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. I sometimes call it the balls to the walls crazy goal, and then I break it up into smaller chunks that kind of lead there, and that tends to shift and change over time. So that's one. The big one I'm keeping to myself for the moment, but I guarantee you it's there.
Awesome. What would be a question or two that someone who's thinking of setting their own business goals ought to be asking themselves that you think that many entrepreneurs overlook?
I think that the first question is, why do I want to do this? I think so many people go into business because they're in love, or rather in lust, with an idea, again, with the emotions driving what they're trying to accomplish, instead of that rational thinking of where is it that I'm trying to go, and why do I really want to be there, and is that a sustainable, worthy goal? And so I think having that clarity around it really helps to shape how you approach it and to decide if it's a big enough opportunity, because so many times when people do follow this business lust, they end up with a business. Sometimes it looks more like a job than a true business. It's completely dependent upon them. It doesn't have any equity value. If they go on vacation, they're not making any money. So they're ending up with these pseudo half jobs, half businesses that aren't necessarily a good risk-reward trade-off from not only where they've been, but the other things that they could be doing with their time, with their money, and with their effort. So I think it's really important to have clarity. Is this really where I want to hang my hat, and why? That's got to be the first driver. Once you're pretty clear on that, then I think it's really about giving yourself enough runway. I think that far too often entrepreneurs believe in the field of dreams, the good old, if we build it, they will come. And that doesn't happen anymore in business. It may have happened 20 or 30 years ago when it was a much more sparse competitive landscape. But in today's world, with so many businesses, 6 million are being created every year alone, 28 million small businesses in this country. We don't have the field of dreams situation anymore. So it's going to take a while for any business to get a foundation. And so it's not just about having enough capital and the mindset to endure starting the business. It's about having the wherewithal to operate the business and to be able to live while you create that foundation, which can take 2 to 3 years in time. In fact, I have a little acronym that I love called TGFO, which is Thank God for Oprah, because Oprah Winfrey has this great network, the OWN network, that she started just about 2 years ago that is just starting to get traction. And, the media was up in arms after about 6 months or a year saying, oh, my God, Oprah Winfrey is failing. No, she wasn't. She was just laying that foundation, and it wasn't a surprise to me at all. So if Oprah Winfrey, with every financial resource, with a fantastic network, with a huge fan base, with great experience, if it's going to take Oprah a couple years to get her new venture off the ground, it's probably safe to say it will take you the same. So very glad to finally have that example to point to.
That's a great point of reference. You've often said that business is more like a roller coaster than a merry-go-round. Can you elaborate on that?
I'm convinced that once you become an entrepreneur, you catch being bipolar. I didn't know that it was contagious or something that you can get, but apparently as an entrepreneur you can. And it is amazing to me the high highs and the low lows that you go through, sometimes in rapid succession right after each other. And you really have to have the constitution, the stomach, to be able to handle those, because that is what throws so many entrepreneurs for a loop. It is incredibly tough. Not to say that being an employee is not tough, but it's a different set of circumstances when it's your money on the line, when you're in charge. And for many entrepreneurs who are solo or in small teams, not having sort of that daily support network that they can complain to or reach out to. So it really is something that you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, with leaning into the ride on the roller coaster and realizing that if you get knocked down 7 times, that you need to get up 8 times. That's just part of what it takes, what it means to be an entrepreneur. And there are some people that just don't want any part of that. They don't want the drama. They don't want the highs and the lows. They want the steady. And I think that's completely fine. I really can't blame them. But I think you have to decide whether or not you can handle and work through that. And again, back to my sort of core thesis of emotion versus being rational, you realize when that emotion is starting to play in on you, take a step back and refocus on what it is you're trying to accomplish and why it is that you're doing it.
You speak about something that helps demystify some of the romance of being an entrepreneur. When you mention equity value, most entrepreneurs don't have any idea of what that means or why it's important. Can you explain why it's important to focus on that if you're running a real business?
Absolutely. Well, let me sort of define equity value. Equity value is the value of the business as a going concern, the value of the business by itself that's separate from you. Let's use my friend Terry's business. Terry is a fabulous massage therapist. In fact, I often get a massage from her sort of on a weekly basis, and she is really, really good at what she does. However, her business is completely dependent upon her. When she has things to do, goes on vacation, nobody's massaging, so she's not making any money. And one day when she decides to retire, there's going to be no value in that business because everything is based on her skills. As opposed to somebody who owns perhaps a larger spa that has a stable of massage therapists, who has a business that people come to not just because of the great people who work there, but because there's a whole slew of them. So it's both of those are in and around massage therapy, but only one of them has value that allows the owner to go on vacation and still make money, that creates something that can be sold at the end of the day. And the way that most entrepreneurs really make a lot of money, and the ones that you see on the cover of all the magazines and in the media, is when they're able to sell their business or when they're able to create this value that's not completely dependent upon them. So it's something that business owners really need to think about in terms of their models and in terms of the risk and reward trade-offs that they're building. You know, Terry has basically paid for the pleasure of having a job that she's on the hook for. And so not to say that that doesn't work. It works very well for her, but she has to evaluate that risk and reward. And, you know, at some point she may choose to scale that business and bring in other massage therapists and maybe add other services so that she can create value that's not just dependent upon her.
For entrepreneurs to really make money, one of the other aspects that they leave out, I've noticed as well, is that they don't take into account all of the costs and expenses that go into running a business. Is that something that you find when you counsel entrepreneurs and business owners that are looking to scale? What are some of the other things that you would add to having them evaluate to make a really clear-eyed decision about scaling their business?
Well, I think there's something I tend to refer to as the rule of 3, and that anything that you would do in business, is going to take 3 times longer, is going to cost 3 times more, and is going to be 3 times as difficult as you anticipate. So whatever amounts of money that they think they're going to make or expenses they think they're going to incur or time period that they think it's going to take them to get a website done, et cetera, is always underguessed by a value of about 3 times. So I always tend to push entrepreneurs to be much more conservative and give themselves some padding so that they're not in for a huge surprise when that doesn't pan out. So I think that that's really important. But again, in terms of scaling, you have to go back to what's the end goal. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to build a business just for a lifestyle? Are you trying to build something that has equity value? Are you looking to employ other people and give back to the community? Are you looking to leave a legacy? What is it that you want to do? Do you want to sell the business one day? If you want to sell the business one day, you may make different decisions along the line than you would if you're just doing it, for your own benefit. So I think it always goes back to having a lot of clarity about what you see in the future. And I will be very clear that even though you have to have these clear points about the future, it doesn't mean that those can't change. Once you kind of go down a path that's not working or you see other opportunities, you can always tweak it, but it's just important to have that marker to move towards. Otherwise, you're not sure of the quickest, best, and most efficient way to get there.
What do you say to entrepreneurs that want to begin a business or grow their business, yet are unwilling to invest in themselves in order to learn the skills or acquire the resources and capacity to get there?
I say good luck to you. One of the things I actually encourage people to do, especially if you are financially risk averse or that you don't have the financial wherewithal, is to think about being entrepreneurial within the confines of somebody else's organization. You can be an entrepreneur in spirit without risking your own capital. Risking your own capital, you create your own business, but you can still have that entrepreneurial spirit within a corporation or another company or even another small business. And it's just about finding the right one. And sometimes that can be more advantageous because it allows you to start at square two with access to capital and additional resources and credibility that you wouldn't have if you started on your own. So if you're not willing to take the financial risk or maybe even gain some relevant experience, I'd say go do it on somebody else's dime. Go do it within the confines of another organization. You still have something at risk. You're still risking your reputation. You're still risking potentially your job, your salary, but it's a different kind of risk, and sometimes that makes people more comfortable and can be also a good starting point to just say, is this something that I particularly like to do? And it's still not easy. You still have to get buy-in from others. You still have to make it happen, but it can take that big financial barrier out of the equation.
Carol, you have a New York Times best-selling book. People read your blog. They've learned so much from you, where you now can clearly claim the title of thought leader if that was ever useful for you to do. What is it that's allowed you to accumulate that type of thought capital and to share it on such a large scale? Was it something consciously that you wanted to achieve to help further your goals? Was it something where you just keep focusing on it? What were some of the things that you did, and what are a tip or two that you would share with others?
So from my standpoint, one of the things I've learned is that you let the market tell you what it wants from you. You can go out with any product or service. The market's going to tell you if that's what they want, and sometimes they're going to come back and say, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? For me in my life, I have always been the advice giver. One of my nicknames is Lucy Van Pelt, as in Lucy from the Peanuts comic strip, The Doctor Is In, and I fulfill that role not only for friends and sometimes acquaintances, but also for strangers. I kid you not, I cannot spend a day out in the world where somebody that I do not know comes up to me asks me for advice, tells me their life story, asks me the strangest questions, and we're talking airport bathrooms, we're talking grocery stores. I had a woman a couple weeks ago ask me if a package of lettuce seemed light or heavy, and I was just kind of like, I think it seems light, and she seemed to think that was an indication that it was fresh. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I give off this vibe that A, I know what I'm talking about, and B, I'm approachable, so you can ask me and you should follow it. So, over time, you just start fighting that, and you go, obviously, this is what the world wants from me. And in my case, I had to find a way to scale that, because answering the same questions one-on-one time after time became tedious, and it just didn't reach as many people. So by having a blog, by having a book, by being on television, by putting information and content out there, I can answer the question one time and be able to tell as many people as possible, rather than having to do that on a one-off basis. So in my case, it was very much that I've always been in advisory business. I started my career as an investment banker. That's what I was clearly meant to do, and that's frankly what people want from me. So it's just finding the right delivery method to make it a fair trade for both parties.
And what do you do on a daily basis to keep track of the different projects you're involved with, the clients that you're serving, so that you're always staying on track and productive?
Yes, so I'm a big list maker and a big scheduler. So at any point in time, I have at least one master list, sometimes sub-lists, and I use my Outlook calendar extensively to not only program things that need to be done today, but into the future. I have an efficiency in organization, although physical organization is not a competency, but sort of mental and efficiency organization is definitely a competency of mine. So I'm a one, what needs to be done, what's priority, and then I just focus and get it done. I try to block out time, not get distracted, and stick to the schedule. And my schedule is an abomination, because I do live television 2 to 5 times a week, which is moves around quite a bit, and I also travel extensively, so it's very hard for me to even know what my calendar looks like. But my own system of just making sure that things are prioritized, and here's what I need to do here, and here's where I can multitask on a plane or en route, or here's a call that I can make while I'm in a taxi. That's just a constant thing that I'm focused on, and fortunately, I've been able to do that quite well.
So if you think of data, people, and things as 3 different categories that we have to interact with day to day,
yes.
Which would you say is your strongest suit, and which would you say is your weakest?
Well, I'm not a superlative kind of gal. I'm sure you're going to hate the answer to this question, but I'm going to say that I'm adept at all of them. I find them to be interrelated, at least in the way that I interact them. Maybe not as much things as data and people, but the data does no good if there's no people, and the people can't really be helped without the data. So I tend to work, sort of on an even keel amongst them. When I look at my strengths, I've never been sort of a vertical person. I've always said that they're things like monetization, strategy, and problem solving. And to me, that can be applied to sort of any situation, which is why people come to me for business advice, but also feel comfortable telling me their personal problems as well, which works out incredibly well. Because if you think about a small business owner, and again, the emotional involvement that they have with their business, that a lot of times the personal problems are really what's affecting their business rather than traditional business problems.
And what's one of the sources of your inspiration?
That's a really good question. I have no idea. I think I'm one of those people. I do like the 5-minute mentor thing, where I get inspired in little bits and pieces by everything. I'm very curious by nature, so I think just information, people, things going on in the world, sunshine, whatever it is, I draw little bits and pieces from a whole lot of places rather than deep inspiration from any one place. I was never one of those kids growing up who had a hero or an icon or somebody that they looked up to. I've always been somebody who really takes a little bit from everything that I see, good or bad, and tries to incorporate that. So it's just, I think, a different way of looking at the world. Again, maybe that sort of rational lens, but that's sort of the way that I approach it. So I get sort of inspired by everything and nothing, if that makes sense.
It's very zen. I get where you're coming from. Tell me this. Do you like to read? Do you watch YouTubes? Are there favorite blog posts that you read for ideas or inspiration? Or not necessarily inspiration, but just ideas to stimulate?
My reading on a weekly basis is the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, and to some extent the New York Times. And then I also use Twitter as a way to consume content. And so from that, there's various other thought leaders, Harvard Business Review, a whole bunch of other interesting places where I tend to draw little bits and pieces. But I tend to find that I draw most of my sort of inspiration, at least for my writing, from experience. I'm somebody who's constantly, like when I'm walking down the street and I see a funny sign or I see something, like I'm snapping a picture on my BlackBerry about it and making some sort of tweet about it, or I'm having an experience at a restaurant and that I'm getting the business lesson. So I tend to stick to my own what I'm seeing in my lens rather than looking at what other people are doing. It's sort of my go-to way, and again, given my natural curiosity, that's what I tend to focus on. But I'm very much, I spend a lot of time, in terms of hardcore business. The Journal and Barron's every week are really critical. Journal, obviously, daily, and Barron's once a week.
Well, Carol, you've shared so much with us in a short period of time, and it's been such a pleasure. You've given us ideas about looking at our businesses in new ways, defining the success in our own terms, making sure that we give ourselves enough runway to carry out our dreams, because even examples like Oprah, as you point out, take months and years in order to accomplish things, even with all the advantages and resources on their side. You shared a line that entrepreneurs will resonate with, where it's important that if you're knocked down 7 times, get up 8. And we talked about creating equity value, so that if your desire is to create a scalable business, you actually are creating more and more value in that business as time goes on, and looking at the rule of 3, because things will take longer and cost more than originally anticipated, and to make sure that you can make that journey, even incorporating that. Carol Roth, thank you so much for sharing on My Quest for the Best.
Oh, it's been my complete pleasure, Bill. I really enjoyed our chat and appreciate the opportunity to share with your audience.